He waters the mountains from his palace. The earth is satisfied by the fruit of your labor. He causes grass to grow for the livestock and provides crop for man to cultivate, producing food from the earth, wine that makes human hearts glad, making his face shine with oil, and bread that sustains human hearts. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams, springs, and deep water sources, flowing in both valleys and hills, a land of wheat, barley, vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without shortage, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you will mine copper. When you eat and are full, you will bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Be Regenerated. I'm your nutrition host, Cameron Wedel, and we're thrilled to have you here. If this is your first episode with us, you have come to the right one. If you're curious on the title, What is Biblical Nutrition? We're going to give you a definition, a working definition today. And you may be someone who accepts the Word of God as the authoritative blueprint for human flourishing that it claims to be, or you might just be curious as to what this whole ancient biblical nutrition trend is about. We are going to answer your questions today, and we're going to paint a really clear picture as to what God prescribes in the Scripture for humanity to thrive. And I mean the specific food groups, what we should be eating. The questions we've been getting from our listeners, and I have to say thank you to all of our listeners who have been sending in questions and asking when the next episode is going to drop. What are we going to be talking about next? Clearly, there's a hunger for more of what we've already been doing. So that means so much to us. Thank you for waiting patiently. We have missed you in our brief hiatus this summer. But we've had a very productive summer at Be Regenerated with the launch of our Brotherhood. So I also need to say thank you to all the men who have joined as members there. We could not be doing this without you. You are giving us the ability to produce podcasts, to create content around what men, Christian men, need and want in order to live energetic and strong lives, leading their families, their communities, perhaps men that want to start a family in order to have a healthier society from the ground up. It starts with you and your discipline and your training of your body, what you're feeding yourself, and how you're executing on a daily basis. And we give you all the tools, the motivation, the encouragement, and the fun within our clean and focused community with the Brotherhood. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but I have to just say thank you to all the men who joined us in our founding. We are beyond thrilled, and it's exceeded all of our expectations with the engagement that we've had there and seeing the changes in men's lives in just a short period of time. It's only been 6 weeks since we launched this thing. The results that we're seeing, the feedback that we're getting is really motivating for us. So I could not be more excited about what's coming in the future. What is even more encouraging is the top questions that we're getting, maybe the top obstacles that men are facing have to do with nutrition. And really the nature of those questions centers around, first of all, what should we be eating? What do I need to do? If I don't have an idea of what's good and what's bad, then I don't know what I should be consuming and what I should be avoiding. And I'm going to be at the whims of my cravings, and I'm going to be reactive. You need to have a working battle plan. And most guys simply don't have that. So we're going to give that to you. But I need to now give a specific definition for biblical nutrition. And the reason that we have to give a definition to this term is because it is being used. If you go on Twitter, most of the people there using the word biblical, or ancient is another common term. You see primal being used when it comes to nutrition. It's very popular. It's the current trend that we have right now, particularly on the red pill side or the truther side. People are responding to all of the garbage that we've been told and what's been promoted on one side, and they're going extreme to the other side and literally skipping over what's very clear and perspicuous from Scripture. And I'm today going to address that. So a functional definition for biblical nutrition, and this is a definition that I wrote, that I came up with over my decade plus of investigating this subject, reading many different books and perusing through what people are saying, and also looking at what's going on right now. Here is the definition.
Biblical nutrition is the provision and prominence of the unadulterated whole food prescription found in the Bible.
Unpacking this one word at a time. First of all, provision. We discussed this at length in our first episode, Food in Genesis. So you need to go back and listen to that because you're going to have clearly ruled out genetically modified organisms and other aberrations that are commonly called food. Remember, if it's something that's genetically modified or you're taking different orders of nature, different species and splicing them together in a lab, that's not food by any stretch of the imagination. It's not functionally food as God designed. And if you're eating something that has killer genes or pesticides literally built into it, coated into it from the time that it's raised and grown, that's not food. And we also talked about in a previous episode how definitionally food wouldn't be any of the junk foods that we have. So a lot of people will use the verse that Jesus says where it's not what goes into a person's mouth that defiles them because it goes in and it's eliminated, but rather what comes out of them. Clearly, Jesus was not talking about junk food because that wasn't available at the time. That's a new invention in history. It's new within the last century. So Jesus would have been talking about the foods that he ate. And when I conclude this episode on biblical nutrition, we're going to talk about what did Jesus eat? Because we all know the common phrase, what would Jesus do? What did Jesus do, first of all? And what would Jesus eat? What did Jesus eat? Very easy. And that brings us to the whole food prescription found in the Bible. So 3 P's in the definition here: provision, prominence, and prescription. So we have a prescription from the Bible from the beginning, and it does change over time. We have to acknowledge this. What's given in the garden changes because of the changes to the environment and when God cursed the ground. And then what changes after the flood when God completely overhauls the environment of the planet. And then we also have changes when God brings his people into the promised land in the Mosaic covenant, which is different from the Noahic covenant and what was allowed to be eaten. We go back to the Noahic blueprint for food when we come to the book of Acts, where they refer back to what God told Noah was good for all humans to eat. Because remember, Noah and his family were the restart of humanity. They were the only people on the earth at the time. God then allows again many more foods. And that doesn't mean that those things are good for us, or that that's what God prescribed for good health. And that's an important distinction because while we have freedom there, if we're going to say that that's okay, we still have to acknowledge that God had good reasoning for what he limited and what he told the Israelites to eat when they were going into the promised land. And we need to look at that. So that's all part of biblical nutrition. There is freedom there, and we need to remember that and not bind the consciences of others. But we have to just be clear and understand that God has wisdom and what he prescribed. And the closer that we get to that prescription, the better off we'll be. And the reason that I'm going to rule out junk food, fast food, genetically modified organisms, and chemically changed substances is because those just aren't food from the definition of scripture. They're not the prescription. So that is the most important word here in this definition is prescription. What did God prescribe? We always need to be going back to that. And I'm going to break that down for you. And unadulterated is a well-chosen adjective for that because we truly live in the most dire era that humanity has yet seen because of the adulteration of our food and of our environment. Now, I am not pessimistic, and I also am not a fatalist. I don't embrace the climate catastrophe. I don't embrace the fact that humanity has irrevocably destroyed the world and the environment, and we have to reduce the population, and we have to reduce fertility, and we have to kill babies, and all of these other crazy things that humans are currently doing. In fact, we have population collapse on the horizon. This all goes back to our food. We have destroyed the environment because we have taken the blueprint that God gave us for farming and agriculture, which is to care for the land, to be thoughtful about it. And we have taken humans off the land first and foremost, and we've put them into urban areas. We've separated families. We've broken down families in the modern world in the West, and we've exported this all around the world. So it's a global problem at this point. And then we took the food that God gave us, and we decided that we can destroy the land, that we can put petrochemicals in it, we can do industrial fertilizers, and we can try to speed up these processes that God designed to take time for a reason. And God also gives us abundance within that. We've tried to undercut all of that, first of all, for financial gain, and then now for even more nefarious reasons, such as population control. When you look at all of the hegemonies around the world, the chemical companies, who are also the pesticide companies, who are also the medication providers, who are oftentimes even the food companies themselves, they're either all owned by the same entities or quickly connected together through various transactions and partnerships. And most of the shares of those companies being publicly traded are owned by a handful of big hedge funds who have specific goals for humanity. And this is not anything new. I'm not going to dive into all the different conspiracies around them. Most of them are not even theories at this point because they've all just told us what they want to do. Well, what's the root of their goals? What is their primary game plan? Actually, before getting people convinced to kill their own babies and to not have children and move into dirty, polluted areas, cities, and get into debt and drink bad water, not live off the land and be at odds with our neighbors, before they got people to do all those things, they just started ruining our food. It's a very simple game plan. In fact, it's the game plan of Satan in the garden.
Think of modern advertising as you consider the way in which food caused the original couple to fall. Much of food processing has little to do with the provision of food to the consumer. It alters the food to make it tickle the taste buds, shimmer before the eye, and to make the product sound like you'll become a sports superstar or the attractive desires of the opposite sex.
This is a time of adulteration of God's blueprint. And so an alternate definition of biblical nutrition, in other words, is just the blueprint for human fuel and flourishing. Human fuel and flourishing. God's blueprint is his prescription of fuel that causes flourishing, which is food grown in season, in diversity, and in a way that honors the land, that cares for the land, and also produces the most nutrition. That has nothing to do with conventional agriculture. Conventional agriculture is all about having as little people involved in the farming process as possible in order to produce the greatest yield to just have one thing. Sure, everybody wants to make the case that this has been so good for humanity because look, we have so much food. We're overfed and undernourished. We have not solved the problem because we decided to go about it our own way through conventional and industrial means and try to undercut what God designed. And by doing so, we've completely destroyed our land. America used to have the most fertile soil in the world. We have the most navigable riverways, more than all the other continents combined. We had incredibly fertile soil. Places like California used to be the breadbasket of the world, but we've completely destroyed that through conventional pesticides and agriculture. We've sprayed our land with things that are toxic so that now we're all perishing because of the amount of poison that is building up in our bodies and because it's so difficult to get nutrients out of the food. We have an overabundance of dead food, and it is a complete chore for the average family to discover where to get nutrients. Literally, my job is to help individuals and families figure out how to get nutrition, where they can shop locally, what is actually good at the store, what supplements actually have nutrients in them, because lo and behold, the supplement industry is very much the same as those other industries and how corrupt it is. And most supplements not only don't contain the nutrients that are on the label, they actually contain things that are poisonous and that are not in the human food blueprint. All of that to say, obviously, we need to fix those things, but we have to go back to God's design in order to have some hope. And I have great hope. I'm not pessimistic about the future of humanity. I'm not a climate alarmist. I don't believe that we cannot recover from this. We can, and we will. But if we don't make some huge changes in our individual families, if you're listening to this and you're not making nutrition for your family a priority, you are going to be blindsided, and it could cost you your life and it could cost you your family's life. Over 85% of people are dying from preventable diseases or from the rapid growth of strange cancers and other things that have changed within the last couple of years. And I'll leave you to do your own research on that front. But we need to stop listening to companies and just constantly giving our money and stuffing into our bodies these products that are created by people who hate you, who don't want you to have children, who don't want you to thrive and flourish. And we need to go back to God's word. And then we need to say, where can I get those things? If I'm supplementing, is it from food that is human natural? Is it beyond organic? It doesn't have any pesticides in it. If that's my standard for food, it should be my standard for supplement. And I am supplementing to replace what I'm not getting in my diet with my food. So I need to be getting closer to that in my diet. So let's look at a really great scripture that gives us an idea of what God wanted his people to eat when they were going into the promised land. Because remember, we've already covered what God prescribed in the beginning, and I gave a brief synopsis of how God changed things over time. Let's look at when God is sending his people who have been freed from Egypt and they're being sent into the promised land.
The riffraff among them had a strong craving for other food. The Israelites wept again and said, "Who will feed us meat? We remember the free fish we ate in Egypt, along with the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now our appetite is gone. There is nothing to look at but this manna."
So when God's sending his people in to take over a land, which by the way has been polluted and corrupted by the people that live within it, they're boiling animals in their own mother's milk, they're sacrificing their own children in fire to their fertility gods. They're doing so many grotesque and crazy things that the Lord is finally sick of them. And remember, God is not sending Israel into the promised land because they're good people. In fact, he had to wipe out a whole generation of them in between because he couldn't use them in the promised land because they were unfaithful, because they actually hungered for what was back in Egypt. God had to cleanse them first, and then he gave them laws in order to be different from the people that he was sending them in to destroy. God was patient for over 400 years with the people in Canaan, and then his patience came to an end, like it did in the flood with Noah. And he sends the Israelites in saying, if you act like them, I will do the same thing to you that I'm about to do to them through you. I'm going to send you in. You're going to destroy giants, and you're going to inherit a land that I love, that I cared for, but that the people in it are destroying. No, you're going to inherit that land, and here's how I want you to care for it, which is why God gives them all kinds of laws on how to care for the land, from not cutting down fruit trees to how to grow things in season, how to give the land rest. Those are all part of God's good plan so that his people would have more than they needed of good things. And in Deuteronomy chapter 8, we have an example of what God gives the Israelites to enjoy in abundance in the land that they're going into that they did not have to cultivate.
"For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams, springs, and deep water sources, flowing in both valleys and hills, a land of wheat, barley, vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey."
Here's the list. We have 2 whole grains, wheat and barley, and then 5 fruits: grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. While this is not exhaustive, it's also not a random list. 7 is the number of perfection in Scripture. God wasn't just saying, okay, here's things that I like. He was telling them, these are things that I want you to expect in abundance and to thrive on. And that means that the Israelites would have relied on these things, not had to eat them in moderation. Let's remember that the Israelite spies had to bring back the cluster of grapes that they cut down from the vine on a giant pole with 2 men carrying it. That's amazing. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, God says, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, then you may eat grapes at your own pleasure. That was a food that God told them they could eat in abundance and didn't necessarily have to be eaten in moderation. Now you might be saying, well, grapes are full of sugar. That's a problem in our modern world because humans are sedentary and we're eating an insane amount of processed sugar already. So yeah, I wouldn't advise that you go and you eat a bunch of grapes right now. If you're like most Americans, 60+% of Americans are either pre-diabetic or have diabetes. So not ideal. But in the time that the Israelites lived, people walked everywhere. They cultivated and they grew their own food. And they're eating the original heirloom varietals, which would have been right off the vine. They couldn't have been kept in the fridge in the supermarket for months at a time. Let me backtrack to the wheat and barley because I can hear it now. I can hear all the Instagram food experts saying, oh, but gluten. Gluten is the root of all of our ills. Whole grains are poison. Really, we should never be eating these. Let's get back to the primal diet. Well, first of all, if you want to get back to the primal diet, and this is something that I have to address in this episode of Biblical Nutrition because it's the current trend, it's the current fad, the primal ancestral carnivore diet. And you'll notice that most of the prominent people of this group, of this trend, have actually backtracked and have at least been adding in lots of fruits. It's this train of we should only be eating meat. First of all, hunter-gatherers basically, if you assume that that's how humanity started and that's the ideal, that makes no sense because those people lived to like the ripe old age of 20, 25. You know, they were being run around by predators. They apparently didn't do a good job of cultivating the land like the earliest humans did, who grew whole grains in order to cultivate the land. If we go back to the first major civilization that we have archaeological evidence of, a lot of archaeological evidence, and if you just look at the Bible, this is the original civilization of the Bible in Mesopotamia, they would be the Sumerians. And this people group quickly learned to cultivate whole grains, and that's how humanity exploded in population on the scene. And we already talked about this in our first episode. We talked about this with the story of Joseph and how whole grains literally saved the whole world from a famine because they're the only food that can be stored until it is processed. It's harvested, but until those grains are opened up, they retain all their nutrients. That's not true of other things. It's not true of the fruits. So God is taking the Israelites into a promised land that is well watered, according to the scripture that we read at the beginning, that is well taken care of, that he's cared for. And this is another important note, because we have to acknowledge that the current grains that we're eating in abundance that are heavily processed are not the same things that people used to eat. They're not these whole grains that went bad within one day because they were truly whole. And I'm going to talk about this in an entire episode. So if you are feeling confused or you're feeling conflicted because you avoid all bread and grains, and by the way, I don't eat a ton of bread myself unless it's homemade by my wife, I'm going to dive into all of that when I talk about true whole grains 2 episodes from now. And I'm really looking forward to it, because the most important nutrients that you've never heard of are in whole grains. The wheat that they would have been eating at the time of Christ and going back to this time in the promised land had like 2 chromosomes. Einkorn wheat, which is considered to be like the oldest heirloom wheat in the world, has only 2 chromosomes. It's the original strain. And the Romans conquered the world on it because they got hold of the grain stores in Egypt. Isn't that amazing? So there's so many different things coming together in human history to prove to us that whole grains really are the staple foundation of human food. Now, if you live in America in the modern world, you are coming off of several generations of not only being sedentary, but of destroying and hybridizing and genetically modifying our whole grains. So we brought wheat over to America. It did really well here. And then we decided it would be really smart if we then processed it to where there's only flour, and then we bleach it. And then we start seeing chronic disease come out of that again. I'm going to dive deep into this in our whole grains episode. I'm really excited because your mind is truly going to be blown at how this is the root of all of our chronic illnesses, what we're not eating. Now, I'm not saying you need to go consume a bunch of calories of bread. Now, I don't do that personally in my life because my calorie output and expenditure doesn't justify me eating the same amounts of bread that our ancestors were eating when they were literally spending all their day long walking around and harvesting it, right? We live in a different time. We have to acknowledge that. But we also have destroyed these things. We've hybridized them to where the wheats that we're consuming now have like 20 to 40 chromosomes in them. And it's designed to have way more gluten so that they can get more per harvest, right? This is what I was talking about early in the episode. We've destroyed these things to say that the wheat that we're consuming in America that you're trying to avoid, or when you have a gluten intolerance or celiac, is the same as what the Israelites were eating is just foolishness and nonsense. This is a classic example of baby and bathwater being thrown out together. Barley, I'm also going to cover in our whole grains episode because it's really unique. And in fact, barley finished beef, it's one of the things that even in Bible times in the ancient world that they would use to fatten the cows. And barley is very similar to a grass and doesn't have negative effects on the animals like GMO corn and soy and wheat, primarily corn and soy that's fed to our modern cattle who are also themselves genetically modified. Remember, we've already gone through the functional definition of food back in our Genesis episode. You need to go listen to that if you haven't yet. Let's go through the different fruits that are here. I touched on grapes, figs, really important. Fig trees are around from the beginning to the end of Scripture. What did Adam and Eve use to sew leaves together to cover themselves when they realized they were naked after they sinned? Fig leaves. So there were fig trees in the garden. Isn't that amazing? Pomegranates. Pomegranate is sometimes considered to potentially be the fruit of the Garden of Eden. That's more of just a popular myth. But pomegranates are full of an incredible amount of antioxidants. And they were such a prized food for vibrancy, longevity, and taste and flavor that they're even mentioned in the book of Song of Solomon. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates. That's some of the love language in that book, Song of Solomon, chapter 4. Olives. Olives are perhaps olives and olive oil. The oil from this fruit. Olives are a fruit of a tree. Olive oil and honey. God's saying, I'm sending you into a land of olive oil and of honey. Olives being put up there with honey. I often hear people quote, especially in the ancestral or trying to foray into the biblical food, they're saying, God said he would send them into a land of milk and honey. So just consume raw milk and then honey. Honey is your only sweetener. Now, I love honey and I love raw milk. Those are both 2 complete whole foods that are really good for you. We're going to dive into those as well. Curiously enough, the raw milk is not on this list. And I'm going to step out on a limb and say that even though it would have been prized in abundance and would have been used, it is not necessarily available all year round because milk from the animals is only available when the animals have given birth to their young and then they're producing milk, which isn't all the time. Animals should not constantly be pregnant. They can't constantly be pregnant, and it's not good for them. We are unfair and we are mean to the animals that God has given us to steward, and industrial feed and milking lots and dairy operations are really terrible. They're terrible for the animals. God's not pleased with that. And they're also bad for us. And then that milk is destroyed when it's pasteurized, homogenized, of course, added hormones, all that kind of stuff. So generally what we're consuming today as far as milk is not really milk. And in fact, honey. This might get under your skin a little bit, but most honey that people are consuming today is not honey. There's no trace of bee pollen in it. A lot of times it's just corn syrup. I don't know if you've ever eaten or bought the honey as a kid, maybe in the bottle, like the little honey bear. And most of those, that brand was actually exposed several years ago to actually have no honey in it. It was literally just corn syrup put in a thing that says honey. They were allowed to do that because technically the brand was called Honey Bear, not what was actually in it. So it's really important if you're going for honey that you make sure that it's local, that you actually know that it contains real raw honey in it, that it hasn't been heated up, that it hasn't been destroyed. Honey was considered in the Bible to be something that was a treat, not something that you would just consume constantly and all the time. This is important because even though it's probably the best natural sweetener, and both honey and olive oil, by the way, have many different medicinal uses. Honey is amazing for your skin. Raw honey, great source of carbohydrates and of fuel. If you're doing exercise, you should be doing exercise. Honey is great for that. I would say a good trend happening right now where people are saying, ditch all of the electrolytes and synthetic things. Just have honey and sea salt. There you go. There's your electrolytes. There's your carbs for your workout. That's pretty good advice. I eat a piece of fruit generally before I go work out because that's going to be good, accessible carbs with great fiber and also antioxidants to prevent all the oxidative stress that my body's undergoing while I'm exercising. Those different nutrient components, those restorative things are found in all of these foods that God provides. Olive oil is perhaps the best healthy fat that there is because it's got the right ratios in there. Olive oil is the centerpiece for the Mediterranean diet as far as the healthy oils go. Now, here's another area where we have to have discernment because there was a study done and basically they found that all of this imported olive oil into the United States was essentially shoe polish. Didn't really have olives in it. It was highly processed and was rancid. There came out of this an organization called the California Olive Oil Council because California, being a Mediterranean client, and by the way, basically all of the things on this list grow very well in California. It's why it was considered the breadbasket of the world for a short period of time before conventional agriculture destroyed the land and then the government came behind them after working with them and then destroyed the land even more. That's what's going on right now in the state, and it's really sad. But all that to say, there was a study done by UC Davis on olives, and they found that we were being completely scammed. Companies who were saying that they were importing olive oil from these other countries. And the really sad thing about this is our government, these three-letter alphabet agencies that we spend billions of dollars in taxpayer money on, don't actually protect us. They protect the industries who pay the government to keep them in power. First and foremost, the drug industry, because that does kill people. And then, of course, they protect the chemical industry and then the conventional food industry. Farmers and big operations, huge operations, grow things in a way that is terrible to the animals, terrible to the land, and terrible for our bodies. The government basically subsidizes them and keeps them in business. So it took the California Olive Oil Council having to form to say, we're going to protect consumers and we're going to put a seal on olive oil that's grown in California, grown in America, that actually has olives in it and isn't tainted and is cold pressed. We're going to put that together as a third-party organization since you can't trust the government to prevent other countries and these big companies from scamming people, saying one thing on the outside of the bottle and putting something completely different on the inside of the bottle. Just a practical tip for you. If you're wanting to consume olive oil, first of all, it needs to say cold pressed. Then ideally, if it's made in the United States, it should have a California Olive Oil Council seal on it. On top of being cold pressed, it should be in a bottle that is dark to protect it from the destruction of light. Light destroys antioxidants and nutrients. It causes them to oxidize, which is why antioxidants are so important in our diet. Fresh ones, mind you. Ideally be organically grown because we don't want to be consuming oils and fruits with all kinds of pesticides in them. And organic, by the way, doesn't mean no pesticides. It just means topical pesticides. And you can do a little bit more research on that. We will discuss that in a future episode. If all of what I just shared about some of the problems in the food industry with the foods that we think are healthy that we're eating, you might have been, just going and getting whatever olive oil you can, thinking it's healthy for you. And then what happens is people find out about these things and they get so mad. And then everybody just goes, okay, throw this entire thing out. Throw out wheat. Throw out olive oil. It's bad for you. It's got the wrong omegas and everything. But yeah, that's because it's not cold pressed. It's rancid. It's bad. We need to figure out which companies, which providers, which farmers have integrity, which supplement providers have integrity and are providing those things at high quality. And we need to support them rather than just trying to eliminate that whole food group. Because if you are on the carnivore train, to get back to this, if you're someone that's on the animal-based primary train, which is really where all the people using the term biblical and ancient nutrition are coming from right now, eat everything animal, eat meat and eat butter. And even if you can't afford high quality, just do it. Well, those animals are eating these bad foods that you're trying to avoid, consuming these same genetically modified grains that you're trying to avoid and that you're telling everybody else are bad. Rightfully so. You are eating what the animal has eaten as well. You're getting those byproducts. Those things are going to be in the meat. Now, granted, not in as high of a quantity if you were just eating them yourselves, which is why people see some results. But you will see an increase in cancer growth and many other things if the quality of the meat that you're eating and the animal products you're eating is not good. Because the body wasn't designed to primarily just consume fats all the time, you need other nutrients to help break it down. And if the fats that you're consuming are saturated and rancid and old and full of other chemicals and toxins that are in the animals or that are added to it, then you are overloading your body with a pretty big toxic load and you're rapidly aging your body. About the amount of anecdotes that you're seeing, there are a lot of people out there who have done carnivore for 6 months or a year or a few months, and they've got some blood work done and they see really good changes. And I'm not discounting that. I'm not discounting it as a whole. It's a useful tool, just like other diets can be for a little while. If you do the paleo diet for a little while, you can kick sugar cravings. You can really help heal your microbiome. You can heal cavities in your mouth even. If you do the ketogenic diet, you can cut off the supply of glucose and sugar, and you can really help your body in many ways. But those are very restrictive diets that come with a lot of nutritional deficiencies and are just not enjoyable and sustainable for most people over the long haul. The same is true of the carnivore diet. It's extremely restrictive. The animals that you are eating are only good if they're eating these other good foods that you can also eat as a human, because humans are omnivores. We're not carnivores. Humans are not designed as carnivores. To tie this into biblical nutrition, just look at the design of the human body. The human body has faculties to eat all these different things. God originally only gave us fruits and vegetables. He later permitted meat after the flood, when there was no fruits and vegetables growing on the land because it had all been flooded. The proof of this is that humans have a long intestinal tract and we have a set of teeth that's designed to grind and eat other things. Now, not the same as a cow, not the same as herbivores, of course. But if you look at the digestive system of humans, it's not like that of pure carnivore animals like dogs and wolves and bears. Their digestive system is a lot shorter. Their teeth are vastly different from humans. So you can just look at human biology and detect right away that we're supposed to be eating a diet of diversity. Let me give you a few more tips overall on biblical nutrition to help you understand why having the diversity that God gives us in Scripture is really important. When it comes to fruits and vegetables, ultimately a high antioxidant diet is going to enable the maximum longevity. So if you want longevity, there is no long-term data about the carnivore diet. Why? Because it's a new fad and a new phenomenon. Like if you want to go back in history, well, first of all, hunter-gatherers also ate herbs of the field. They ate fruit. They ate really whatever they could get. That's what a hunter-gatherer is. And they would eat whole grains if they came across a people or a tribe that was cultivating them and killed them and took their food. That's exactly what they would do because they're primarily concerned with survival. They didn't have a good survival rate. So that's not the ideal for humanity. That should provide a pretty conclusive blow to this idea that all of humanity needs to switch over to the carnivore diet. Prominent people, I could give many different examples from Paul Saladino to Jordan Peterson, who saw short-term results just eating meat all the time. But they didn't see complete healing. And they actually had nutritional deficiencies and some problems, some toxicity problems, particularly if they were over consuming organ meats. And that's simply because if we look at the liver, for example, the liver is the filtration system of the animal. So if the animal is in an environment where they're being exposed to heavy metals and other toxicants, if they're eating unhealthy foods, where do a lot of those coalesce in their body? In the liver. You're going to eat that organ and you're going to get some of those things. So if you are consuming liver, it needs to be from an animal that is healthy and that is pure. For my part, we do have a farm that we sometimes eat the organs from the animals, and that's mainly because they're very inexpensive. We don't overconsume them. We put them in little bits in our food. We essentially supplement our food. My wife will shave some liver into foods and we'll mix it in so that you can't really tell, but we don't eat it all the time. It's not a primary staple. And this is obvious because how much of a portion of the meat on that animal is the organ meat. So you should basically eat the ratio of the organ meat to the meat in the animal. That's how it would work out in your diet. If you are going to consume something like liver and other organ meats, one part of the animal, a small part of the animal compared to the rest of the meat. Liver in itself, I consume actually in a supplement form from the first company who ever made a liver supplement. And they have multiple stages of testing so that I know 100% there are no toxicants, and they have a zero tolerance policy for any bad things that could be built up in the liver of that animal from very healthy animals. And then the one farmer that we do buy the organs from, we know the quality. They range on the purest land in the lower 48 of the United States. And then those animals are also finished on barley, as I mentioned. I'll get into some of those things when we move into the other categories of nutrition. I had to just cover several different angles here of biblical nutrition, not only giving you a definition, giving you an idea of what you need to look out for. What are some of the blind spots? What are some of the problems with the modern trends? I could level a lot of the same things at the vegan diet. It restricts what God allows humans to have.
Welcome anyone who is weak in the faith, but don't argue about disputed matters. One person believes he may eat anything, while one who is weak eats only vegetables. One who eats must not look down on one who does not eat, and one who does not eat must not judge one who does, because God has accepted him.
God doesn't say meat is bad. Meat is a pleasing aroma. It's satisfying. The priests were to eat meat. God even says the fat is for the Lord. Humans shouldn't be eating too much fat because that's where a lot of the toxins hide in your body, just like they would in the animals. The heavy metals and the endocrine disrupting hormones and other toxicants in your body are hiding inside of your fat cells, which is why it's really important to mobilize those, to exercise, and to be eating other nutrients, which will go and then pull those things out and help your body safely get rid of them. This is why you need a complete diet. It's really important to have antioxidants. In fact, fruits and vegetables are so important that not only did God originally prescribe them as the first food that humans could have lived forever on, but he gives them to us in abundance, as I mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 8, the revitalizing nature of these things, which is why when these carnivore people switch over from just eating animal fats and proteins to eating fresh fruits and vegetables, their skin looks more vibrant. Instead of eating the rancid meat, Daniel ate fresh fruits and vegetables, and the appearance of his skin was instantly better than everyone else's.
Daniel determined that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine he drank, so he asked permission from the chief eunuch not to defile himself. God had granted Daniel kindness and compassion from the chief eunuch. Yet he said to Daniel, "I fear my lord the king, who assigned you food and drink. What if he sees your faces looking thinner than the other young men your age? You would endanger my life with the king." So Daniel said to the guard whom the chief eunuch had assigned to Daniel, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then examine our appearance and the appearance of the young men who are eating the king's food, and deal with your servants based on what you see." He agreed with them about this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, they looked better and healthier than all the young men who were eating the king's food. So the guard continued to remove their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables.
That's what you see in a lot of these anecdotes of people moving from being really restrictive to just fats and meats over to adding then in fruits and then ideally vegetables over time. There are a lot of problems with modern conventional vegetables. That's why you want to buy from your local organic farmer. That's why you want to get regeneratively farmed fruits and vegetables and eat them in season. They have a lot of fresh nutrients, and your skin complexion will literally change. There are a lot of vegetables mentioned in the Bible. There's a lot of fruits mentioned in the Bible. Several of them came out in this list. We have a few other ones that are really noteworthy, like melons, and that would actually include cucumbers, which might be considered a vegetable, but they're actually a fruit. It's interesting to go and see in many of these stories, what did people eat prior to big battles or after battles or when they were celebrating. We have a lot of different biblical stories we could go into, and which we'll do in short mini-sodes later on in the show. So I hope you're really encouraged not to worry. There are a lot of different food groups that are available, that are promoted in scripture and that are good. We have everything from all kinds of different meats, whole grains, to nuts and seeds, and even dairy. By the same token, as we don't want to be people who say that all grains are bad because some people have celiac disease because of the destruction of our guts and of our modern grains, we don't want to say that all dairy is bad because someone has a dairy intolerance. When people start getting to the original food form of those things, when they start getting to the way it was designed, such as raw milk from Jersey cows, for example, like the original cows, then people see a massive difference. I have a number of clients who have celiac who literally consume the healthy fats from whole grains as their primary supplement and have no side effects because they're made from true whole grains like einkorn wheat. Clients that consume in good amounts raw milk powder that doesn't have all the fats and the sugar, the lactose is actually the sugar in the milk. They had a dairy intolerance before and they have no issue with that. They need a lot more nutrients. I have to say, I can't recommend too many books, unfortunately, in the nutrition realm because they're either too complex and not accessible, just hyper-focused on one or two things, or have a lot of faulty assumptions going into them. The amount of books that I've read that start off with the assumption that we evolved, we were hunter-gatherers, but then when they actually start laying out data of population studies and all these things, it counteracts that narrative. When we could just go to scripture and we can see the history of humanity. And even if you think that there were millions of years and all these different things before that, we know when humanity started to flourish conclusively. And that coincides directly with the earliest books in the Bible and what the people did in those books, which we've read many passages of. All right, without further ado, here are my top 3 books for nutrition. The link will be in the description. The first book is What the Bible Says About Healthy Living by Dr. Rex Russell. Whole food nutrition from a biblical perspective and general healthy living, thriving overall. The next book that I'll recommend is called Eat Smart. Sean Stevenson, he's a clinical nutritionist. I love clinical nutritionists. He's got the Model Health Show podcast. Can't recommend it enough. He gets to the truth of things and he doesn't get sidetracked into individual diets. He really focuses on a whole food blueprint like we've talked about in this episode of the podcast. Lastly is the book Genius Foods by Max Lugavere, another awesome whole food source. You can check out his podcast. That's really helpful, very practical. You should follow him as well, Genius Foods. We trust we've given you plenty of food for thought, stories of ways that food has been heavily adulterated. Right now, we deal with the prominence of comfort and ease of access of non-foods, a difficult situation when it comes to getting good quality nutrition in your family. But don't be discouraged by those things, because not only do you have great books and resources that you can read, and you should have a clear understanding now of what God gives us that's good, we also have the ability to regain a lot of ground. The number one way that you can regain ground is actually to get concentrated amounts of whole food nutrients in high amounts into your body. And there's many different ways that you can figure out where you're deficient, depending on which diet you are doing, whether it's carnivore or vegan, plant-based. You are going to have various deficiencies that can be filled in supplement form, as long as the supplements are made from whole foods, and ideally they have to be clinically proven. I don't know why anybody would take any supplement that doesn't have clinical proof behind it. We don't know what it's actually going to do to humans, because that's our same standard for foods. We know what kind of foods are good for people to eat based on lots of different human studies, what these things do on the cellular level. And ultimately, biblical nutrition is about cellular nutrition. That's the scientific side of it. Cellular nutrition is what's going on the cellular level. How is the regeneration process happening in your body? And we've already talked about that as regeneration on the physical level. We're going to dive more into that as we go into specific food groups and how your body activates cellular longevity and regeneration. Let's remember, biblical nutrition is the provision and prominence of the unadulterated whole food prescription in the Bible. The provision and prominence. Prominence means that we're consuming a lot of it, that it's primary, 80-20, 90-10. You might have to be more extreme depending on your health condition. The whole food prescription that's found in the Bible needs to be prominent. And you can adjust that depending on your lifestyle, depending on how active you are, depending on what intolerances you currently have that could be overcome in time, depending on how your gut is doing, by using concentrated nutrients and by removing a lot of the bad things from our diet. And we're here to help you do that. There's a provision that's originally given to us that rules out genetically modified foods and toxic things. That provision is clearly outlined in Scripture, and it's not highly restrictive. There are some boundaries, and there are many freedoms of good things for us to enjoy in abundance, the best things. The unadulterated whole food blueprint is what we want to pursue if we want to see longevity and regeneration in our families. In closing, let me give you 3 brief principles that you need to write down, and if you follow them, you'll do well. This is straight from the book, What the Bible Says About Healthy Living. 1, eat only substances God originally created for food. 2, eat only things as they were originally created, before they were changed or converted or destroyed into processed foods or added chemicals. 3, don't be addicted to food. Don't let it be your master, and don't treat food like your God. If you follow those 3 principles, you will do extremely well.
And that wraps up today's episode of Be Regenerated. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date, don't forget to join our Wisdom Weekly email through our podcast page. Also, your support means the world to us, so if you have a moment, please hit the stars on your listening platform. It really helps us reach more people who can benefit from these discussions. And if you're interested in joining a community of like-minded men striving for holistic health and strength, check out the Be Regenerated Brotherhood at beregenerated.com/brotherhood. It's an exciting platform designed to challenge and support you in your fitness, nutrition, and spiritual disciplines. We also appreciate your support through the Buy Me a Coffee link and our partnership with Neolife for top-notch supplements. You can find all the links and details in the show notes. God bless, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. So, whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God.